People think time moves slowly when you get old, but the truth is the opposite. My name is Walter, and I'm 90 years old, and lately I've been realizing something that took me nearly a lifetime to understand. Time doesn't feel the same when you know there isn't much of it left. When I was young, time felt endless. Days stretched out in front of me like open roads. I remember being 20 and thinking a year was a long time. I remember turning 30 and telling myself I still had decades to figure things out. Back then the future felt huge, like a wide ocean I could sail forever. But somewhere along the way, the ocean started to shrink. I didn't notice it happening at first. Life has a way of keeping you busy enough that you don't stop to measure the years. You wake up, you go to work, you raise children, you pay bills, you solve problems that seem urgent in the moment. 1 year quietly becomes 5, 5 becomes 20, and before you realize it, people start asking you what retirement feels like. I retired when I was 68. I remember the day clearly because everyone told me I would finally have time to travel, time to relax, time to do the things I had always said I'd do one day. That phrase followed me for most of my life. One day I'll take that long trip. One day I'll write letters to old friends. One day I'll spend more afternoons sitting with my father, just listening to his stories. But one day is a strange thing. It always feels like it's waiting somewhere in the future, patiently standing by, and most of the time we assume it will still be there when we finally reach for it. My father passed away when I was 46. I still remember the hospital room, the quiet machines, the way the window light fell across the bed that morning. I had spent years telling myself I would visit him more often when work slowed down. Work never slowed down, and suddenly there was no more time to sit and listen to those stories I thought would always be waiting. You carry moments like that with you as the years go by. Not loudly, not every day, but they stay somewhere in the background, like a quiet echo. When I turned 75, something else started to change. Friends began disappearing from the world one by one. Men I had laughed with for 40 years. Neighbors who used to wave from their porches every morning. Slowly the familiar faces around me grew fewer. That's when time began to feel different. Not faster exactly, but smaller. Imagine holding a jar filled with marbles. When you're young, that jar feels full and heavy. You never worry about taking one out. But when the jar gets close to empty, every marble suddenly matters. That's how time feels when you reach 90. You start noticing things that used to pass by without a second thought. The sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of sunlight on the kitchen floor, the way your granddaughter laughs when she's trying not to laugh. Little things become larger because you understand they're not unlimited anymore. A few years ago, my grandson asked me a question while we were sitting in the backyard. He must have been 12 at the time, curious about everything the way children are. He said, "Grandpa, what's the biggest difference between being young and being old?" I remember smiling because I had never thought about putting it into words before. When you're young, I told him, you think life is mostly about what's ahead of you. You're planning, building, chasing things that seem important at the time. You're always leaning forward into the future. But when you get old, you realize life was never really about the future at all. It was about the moments you were standing in the whole time. I think about that a lot now. I sit by the same living room window most mornings with a cup of tea. The street outside is quiet. The same tree that stood there when my children were small is still there, only taller now. Its branches stretched wider than I ever remember. Time did that while I was busy living. And I suppose that's the strange beauty of it. Life isn't something you fully understand while it's happening. It only becomes clear when you turn around and look at the road behind you. When people hear I'm 90, they often ask me if I'm afraid. Not in the way they expect. I'm not afraid of the years I've lived. Those years are full of laughter, mistakes, ordinary Tuesdays, and quiet dinners that felt small at the time, but now feel enormous in memory. What I feel now is something closer to awareness. You begin to see how fragile every moment really was. The conversations you thought you'd have again someday. The people you assumed would always be around. The afternoons you hurried through because you believed tomorrow was guaranteed. None of us realize how valuable those simple hours are while we're inside them. And that's why time feels different when you reach the end of a long life. Not because it's running faster, but because you finally see its true shape. It was never endless. It was always a collection of moments quietly passing through your hands. If there's one thing I wish I understood earlier, it's that the ordinary parts of life were never ordinary at all. They were the real thing. The entire story happening right in front of me while I was busy waiting for something bigger. At 90 years old, the future is a smaller place than it used to be. I know that. I feel it in the quiet mornings and the slower steps across the room. But strangely enough, that understanding has made life feel clearer than it ever did before. Because when you know time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. You listen more carefully when someone is speaking. You watch sunsets a little longer. You say the words you used to postpone. And if you're young enough to still believe time is endless, then maybe there's one small thing I hope you carry with you after hearing an old man talk like this. The life you're waiting to begin has already started. It's happening right now, in the ordinary minutes of this very day. Don't wait until you're 90 to realize how precious those minutes were.